How would I, as a wealth manager, certified financial planner, and certified private wealth advisor, plan my retirement with only $500,000? Stay with me. $500,000 is quite a bit of money in the American retirement experience. The average retirement account in America has about $273,000 in it. You have to look at that number with a bit of further detail because that includes baby boomers, silent generation, Gen X, etc. Currently, I'm end of Gen X, beginning of millennials. I'm in my mid 40s. Now, there's a couple of caveats, big caveats that I would make with what I'm going to show you. First of all, I would not consider this financial advice. This is definitely not financial advice. I would never do this in a client's account. Well, why? Because the strategy is way too risky for the vast majority of clients, and the company that I work for simply would not allow it. There are a lot of checks and balances that occur on my work when I'm doing financial plans or planning out people's retirement accounts and handling people's retirement money, and my organization simply would not allow this sort of configuration to go forward. There's several other pieces of information that I'm going to reiterate, but do not take this as financial advice. This is something I would consider doing in my own personal retirement account, but it's because my situation is very unique and I also have the training and ability to be able to manage the money at a very high level. Some other caveats that you need to consider is number one, I don't particularly believe in early retirement. The numbers that I'm actually going to show you on the computer is retirement beginning at age 70. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to work until age 70. It could mean that I retire at 60 or 62, but I have other assets that I could draw on between 62 and 70 that do not touch my retirement account assets. So that's one big important caveat. The numbers are going to start at 70 simply because retiring early is too difficult to carry off with 500,000. But if you retire at age 70, retiring with 500,000 is more of a possibility. The next thing I would say is I don't adhere to the 4% rule. I use 4% rule in my clients' accounts. I use 4% rules with people that I am working with. I don't use it in my account for very specific purposes. First things first, I'm not married. I don't have any kids. I don't have any heirs. So, if I die with zero, I consider that, the last check on the way out bounces. I consider that a success. I also have a long-term care policy on myself. So if I start running low on money at the end of my life, I know I have that long-term care policy that I can rely on to get assistance with health or other issues that may occur. Now, I checked the numbers because I was curious exactly how many Americans have long-term care policies. Only about 4% of Americans over the age of 50 have long-term care policies. And I think that number is going to be diminishing quite a bit over the coming decades. So it is really quite a rare phenomenon that someone actually has a long-term care policy. But personally, in my personal accounts, I don't adhere to the 4% rule. I would never tell a client that. That's because A, I'm a financial advisor, B, my last check can bounce because I don't have any kids or any heirs, and C, because I have a pretty decent long-term care policy that can take care of me if I experience a long-term care event towards the end of life. The next thing that's a bit of a caveat here is I'm going to show you 100% equity configuration. I would never do 100% equity configuration in a retirement account for my clients. Typically, it's an interplay between stocks and bonds in a client account, like 80% stock, 20% bonds, or 60% stock, 40% bonds. And that is basically to put in structure and support to make sure things don't go off the edge of a cliff should things get a bit choppy in the market. I'm comfortable holding 100% equity configuration in my personal account. So I'm going to show you a $500,000 retirement at age 70 with 100% equity, the good and bad of it, and in my personal retirement plan. And the final thing that I would say, I would wait until age 70 to start taking Social Security. Only about 10% of Americans wait until age 70 to start taking Social Security. Now, with clients, Typically, I don't advise taking early Social Security at age 62 unless there's some sort of extenuating circumstances, but they at least wait until full retirement age, which is 67, to start taking their Social Security. Some will wait until age 70, and the people who typically wait until age 70 typically work until age 70, or they have longevity in their family. Like I said, I don't necessarily believe in early retirement myself. Realistically, I'm knocking on wood here. I could see myself working to 70, maybe even a little bit beyond. It's quite common in the field of financial advising that I know many advisors who work to 70 and beyond in this field. And I also have, with good health and with care, potentially longevity in my family. So I could see myself waiting until age 70 to start taking my Social Security benefits. So I'm going to switch over to my computer and I'm going to show you my numbers. Now, as a reminder, I'm not giving this as advice. I would never do this in a client account, and I would never advise an individual to do this. This is a very special circumstance due to the way that my life is designed, that something like this may make sense for myself. But even if it makes sense for myself, I probably would not do this, and I'm going to go into detail of why. But first things first, we're going to have the starting amount at $500,000. Now, that's not the real amount that I have saved for retirement. It is different, but I wanted to show you that it is possible to do this at $500,000. The withdrawal rate, instead of 4%, I'm going in at 8%. Why am I going in at 8%? Well, A, I have no heirs. I don't want to leave anything to anyone. I want to die with zero. B, I have a long-term care policy that can cover me in the event of a long-term care event. And so I can go in a bit more aggressive. I'm also starting at age 70, and in this projection, I'm planning to live until 90. God willing, if good health, I will live longer than that. But I'm just saying from 70 to 90, so I know I have 20 years to cover. So I'm going in with an 8% withdrawal rate. My Social Security, I used a number that's like adjacent to mine. This is not my exact number. But if I retire at age 70, I'll get about $4,700 a month. That means I could expect about $56,000 a year in Social Security. I understand the issues with Social Security, but I can only take it as it exists today. And right now, this is the Social Security number I have on file. Now, in terms of historical returns, I took the historical returns dating back to 2003 in the S&P 500. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in this video, but the past 20 years in the S&P 500 have been a bit ahistoric, and we have seen meteoric market rises, and that's due to a variety of circumstances that may be changing in the future. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But let's run through the numbers year by year and see how this look. So, first year at age 70, I go ahead and retire. And at age 70, back in 2003, the market return was 26%, which is a really, really good return that year. And this is what my numbers look like. I would withdraw at 8%, about $50,500. The total amount I would have in my account at the end of the year would be about $631,900. After taxes, my Social Security and my IRA withdrawal would be about $85,312. This means about $7,100 post tax. Now, can I live on $7,100 today? No. Because I have a mortgage, because I live in a very high cost of living area like San Francisco, and I have other expenses. Could I live on $7,109 if I were in my 70s? Maybe. If I decided to leave the Bay Area, if I owned a home outright and didn't have many expenses, and this was just basically maintenance on my home, insurance, property tax, maybe transportation, dining out, travel, maybe. But still, I have a lot of travel expenses. I like to dine out. This would probably still be a little bit tight for me, but it would be doable if I'm willing to make adjustments in my life, which I am not very flexible about my lifestyle. But for most people, I fully acknowledge that 7,000 as a single person, this would be a lot of money. But once again, it's dependent on your lifestyle. So let's go through year by year and let's take a look up to 2008 where we had that 40% drop in the market. So basically, and yeah, I wanted to put in a cost of living increase for Social Security at 3% and just a 3% cost of living adjustment overall. Things would look fine until 2008. And 2008 is where things start getting scary. So 2007, my account balance would actually be growing, even though I'm taking money out. It would be $816,833 at the end of the year, where I started with just half a million, and I'm taking pretty big disbursements on this. So I'd be pretty darn happy. But boom, 2008. 2008 created the market. There was almost a 40% decline on a 100% equity portfolio. The market was hurting pretty bad. I would have to reduce my withdrawals to $42,206. My after-tax income would drop about 18,000 that year to $80,318, and my monthly income would drop to about 6,600. If you're living on this amount of money, any drop in your income is going to be felt because you're used to living pretty large. And my clients who are used to living pretty large don't like seeing any drop in income. So, yeah, this would affect me. I would be concerned at this point. But look what happens in 2009. We see a 23% increase in the market and the amount starts going back up. So you could see over time after 2008, which is a pretty big blip, into 2009, 2010, 2011, things actually take off. And by the end of my life, if I play my cards correctly, I could actually die with a pretty considerable amount of money, possibly 2.5 million in my account. Now, do I think I would really die with 2.5 million? No, I would die with less than that because emergencies happen, things happen. This doesn't account for any sort of emergency. This doesn't account for any sort of a car that is totaled, a roof that leaks, a hot water heater that needs to be replaced, a sudden trip that my friends are taking that I must take that it doesn't fall into the budget. It doesn't account for any of those things that can happen over 20 years of life that factor into retirement. So I don't believe I would leave this earth with 2.5 million. I probably would leave this earth with more in the ballpark of 1 million, which is still a considerable amount of money, but you also have to consider we're fast forwarding 20 years. So if the value of the dollar, the halves every 25 years, that 1 million may be worth 500,000, which is still a considerable amount of money. But I wouldn't be optimistic that I would depart this earth with 2.5 million. And once again, I would probably this 17,000, which looks impressive in year 90. This is 17,000 fast forwarded 20 years. So the 17,000 value would probably be about half of what it is today. Have the purchasing power of half of what it has. So it would probably be the equivalent of about 8,000, 8,500 a month, which is nothing to sneeze at. It's not a small amount of money. But once again, if you're used to living high on the hog, it can be really hard to adjust down to $8,500 a month, even though most Americans would consider that quite generous for a single person. It probably would not be sufficient for me. I could take it, I could make it work. If it is all I had, I would make it work. But for people who just make more money and do other things, it may not be a sufficient amount of money. Now, there's a couple of caveats with this, and unless you have a trained eye, you're not going to catch it. First things first, retirement at age 70. Like I said, most Americans do not want to work until age 70. My field of being a wealth manager, financial advisor, working until age 70 is common. Working beyond age 70 is common. So, I have the benefit of being in a specialized field where ageism really isn't a big deal. Actually, age works to your advantage. And working past age 70 is not the exception. I wouldn't say it's the rule, but it's definitely not the exception. I run across financial advisors who are 70 plus all the time. They typically retire in their mid 70s. I have seen a handful in their later 70s, but by age 80, they're gone. They're retired. Um, I would say the average age is probably 72, 73, maybe 74. By 75, people start disappearing in financial advising. So I have that advantage. I'm also taking an enormous withdrawal because, like I said, I have no beneficiaries. If you have kids, this really doesn't work. If you want to leave a legacy to the next generation, taking an 8% withdrawal rate a year is just super edgy. And I would not advise of it. If you don't have a long-term care policy and can't provide any provisions for yourself in long-term care, I would never suggest taking an 8% withdrawal because you're going to need to have some sum of money to provide long-term care should you experience a long-term care issue. And this issue is the elephant. One other issue, my Social Security is very high. This number probably will go higher for me. A lot of this lifestyle is dependent on Social Security, and for a lot of Americans, they're not going to have Social Security quite that high. Okay, bigger elephant in the room is this: the historical market performance. The last 20 years in the stock market have been exceptional, and that's been due to growth in the American economy. It's also been due to economic policy that really has buoyed the average return in the average portfolio. Um, there has been discussion for some time that we are coming to an end of an era. And that is it's troubling, but it's really a possibility. And we're seeing it now with the Trump administration, where we're seeing new economic policies that are being unveiled that don't bode well for market performance or overall growth in the American economy. We're seeing a rapid devaluation of the dollar. We came out of the recent round of inflation with a really strong U.S. dollar, and there are many benefits to a strong U.S. dollar, but there are many problems with a very strong US dollars, namely in trade. And so, one thing that it seems like the Trump administration is trying to do is to devalue the dollar. So, to give us an advantage in trade, there's problems with trying to orchestrate a devaluation of the US dollar that I'm not going to get into. But what I wanted to do was point out that this is rather exceptional. And I wanted to show you what this looks like if we didn't have these historic returns in the market. What if these returns and dips were divided by half? And so instead of 26% in 2003, we had 13% return, which is still really good, but it's not a 26% rate of return. What would retirement look like? This entire picture would look very, very different. And let me show you what this would look like. Okay, so basically what I did was went through and looked at the historical returns of the S&P 500. I divided them in half and basically did much the same math to come up with the numbers of what retirement would look like. So you could see that retirement looks really, really, really different. I start off with the same 500,000, but because the market isn't churning those great years where you have 20+% returns, the amount starts to wind down. And at age 90, I'm estimated to have $261,000. I probably would have run out of money somewhere around 81, 82, to be honest. I think that this is generous. A lot of the retirement is very heavily dependent on Social Security each month because I can't take huge withdrawals from the retirement accounts. For the first few years, I might be okay, but 2008 is a reckoning. That's when basically I can't take huge withdrawals from my account anymore, and I basically have to come down quite a bit on the amount that I'm taking from my retirement account. And basically, the amount that I have to take from the retirement account diminishes until age 90. Like I said, I don't even think I would make it to age 90. I would probably run out of money in my early 80s if I am lucky. But to start off with taking 6,700 and end up with 5,200, this is not a good thing. This is a very bad thing. Why? Because devaluation of the dollar over time. This 5,200 will probably have the purchasing power of about half in 20 years' time. So this $5,200 would have the purchasing power of what? $2,700 today. Who can live on $2,700 today? People do it, and I'm not knocking people who do it. But for someone who's used to living like a high on the hog, I probably would not be able to live on $2,700 a month in today's dollars at age 90. So you can see this, just a twist of fate and a different return, consistent return in a market or different market condition completely changes your retirement plan. And the last 20 years that we've had in the market since 2003, 2004 may not mirror the next 20 years that we have in the market. There are some market conditions that are changing. The current administration are making changes to trade policy. A lot of what we've seen over the last 20 years is because a lot of core consumer goods or core consumer um, items were relatively cheap. You think about how much a television cost 30 years ago versus how much a television costs today, or how much a computer cost, or a phone, or even furniture, things like that. It's because of global trade policy made those items very cheap to Americans. But if you look at things like healthcare, housing, education, those are things that cannot be outsourced or cannot be wound up in a trade policy. And the cost of housing, education, and healthcare have skyrocketed over the past 30 years. So, we have a situation shaping up where trade policies are changing, and core consumer goods and staples may not be cheap anymore. Food is not going to be cheap anymore. Consumer electronics are not going to be cheap anymore. You're not going to be able to go out and buy a television for $200. You're not going to be able to buy a computer for $1,000. Things are going to start getting very expensive very soon. And if Donald Trump's economic policy comes to pass, and many of those consumer goods are produced on American soil and with American labor, you're going to see the price absolutely skyrocket. So the cost of living and inflation are going to go up very rapidly. So there you have it, a different retirement plan for a financial advisor. 100% equity portfolio, taking an 8% withdrawal, starting withdrawal at age 70 to age 90 with a high Social Security. Um, the big caveat here is I don't think the market conditions of the last 20 years are going to hold up for the next 20 years. And I think things are going to get a lot more expensive because the trade policies that provided cheap consumer goods are rapidly changing. So there you have it, an alternative take on retirement with $500,000 at age 70. I don't even think I would do this myself, and it's because I don't think the market returns over the next 20 years will match the market returns over the last 20 years. But tell me what you think. Tell me what you like and tell me what you don't like. And if you found this information useful, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.